Democrats didn't say, we are going to deny this to Trump merely because he's in the other party because the American people need it. When Democrats said, okay, well, now it's us, we'll do a relief bill that's very similar to what Trump did, Republicans said, we're not participating at all. So what you've just said is arguably the biggest indictment of the obstructionist Republicans that I can
think you're
imagine.
misinterpreting what I said.
No,
or
I don't think so.
Using your own facts because
What's happening, everybody? David Pakman interviewed Republican political and policy strategist Amanda Makki. David Pakman and Amanda Makki argue which party, Republicans or Democrats, are better about reaching across the aisle and negotiating when passing bills. That said, let's watch woke genius David Pakman get throttled on yet another topic on which he's ill-prepared to discuss. Let's go.
Fine. Okay, good. So let's talk a little bit about policy. My interpretation of the Republican Party right now and basically since the pandemic is that it's essentially a party of no. It's we don't want to do infrastructure. We don't want to do coronavirus guidelines. We don't want to do DACA. We don't want to do tax reform. We don't want to. So there's been really no substantive proposals of policy of what they want. Certainly, we don't want to do any changes to gun legislation. Now, I've said, I don't know that it's a bad strategy for Republicans. And what I mean by that is when you look at a candidacy like Madison Cawthorn, for example, his aide or his staffer straight up said, we're not running a policy office. We're running a communications office. It's memes and tweets and talking about I can put 2 guns on my wheelchair and all this sort of stuff. So my question is, do you think that this is a viable long-term strategy? It might actually be. Like, I don't know that the Republican Party really needs policy given who's voting for them right now.
Well, the Republican Party doesn't control a single lever of the government in Washington right now.
But the last 2 years of the Trump administration, they did.
They had the Senate.
And the White House.
They had the White House and they had the Senate.
Yeah.
And the House was controlled by Democrats.
Right.
So if you're talking about right now, because you were talking about topics for right now, because certainly Trump tried to do infrastructure and the Democrats said no. But if you're looking at issues right now, look, Mitt Romney did an interview and, Mitt Romney is the king of rhinos, I guess you could say. I mean, he would probably be the most moderate, the most willing to work with Democrats. And even he has said that going at this alone on the coronavirus bill, relief bill, was wrong. He and I believe it was 9 other Republican senators visited.
If you like watching videos like these, like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. Let's get back to the video.
The president, the beginning of February, and said, Mr. President, let's pare this bill down. Mr. President, we have other ideas. And President Biden not only did he not listen, he didn't pay attention to a single one of their interests. And it sounds like staff was involved in this.
Yeah.
So be it. The point is, if you want to look back on President Trump, he passed 5 coronavirus bills with bipartisan support, and President Biden didn't do that with bipartisan support.
But Amanda, that's an indictment of Republicans. That's an indictment. The fact you're absolutely right. When it was Trump saying we have to get money to businesses and the American people, Democrats didn't say we are going to deny this to Trump merely because he's in the other party because the American people need it. When Democrats said, okay, well, now it's us, we'll do a relief bill that's very similar to what Trump did, Republicans said, we're not participating at all. So what you've just said is arguably the biggest indictment of the obstructionist Republicans that I can imagine.
I think you're misinterpreting what I said.
No, I don't think so.
Using your own facts, because what I said is that the Republicans went to visit with President Biden, and he dismissed everything that they said. He didn't take a single thing into account. He didn't even work with them. He didn't even come to the table and say, let's sit down and talk. They had
what concessions did Trump make to Democrats?
And he largely blamed it on staff, as did Republicans, the staff saying, we're not interested.
But what concessions did Trump make to Democrats on the COVID bills?
Kennedy Center funding, certainly other pieces of the bill that ultimately the law that Republicans were raked over the coals for. I know
Kennedy Center, wasn't that like $3 million or something?
It doesn't matter. It's the fact that, this is what's interesting to me.
Yeah.
President Trump was impeached by the House. And then 3 months later, he has Nancy Pelosi sit down with Stephen Mnuchin because they obviously Trump.
Unlike Amanda Makki, I have the benefit of being able to do a little bit of research when I do a video. So I can answer David's question about what concessions Trump made in the two major COVID relief bills that he signed. The three major areas that Donald Trump made concessions in the two COVID relief bills that he signed were unemployment benefits, public health funding, and housing aid. And it's not just like, oh, he made three concessions to the Democrats. No, there are multiple concessions in each of those broader categories. So David's just wrong. But I don't think that's why he asked the question. He asked the question assuming she wouldn't know the answer because he's putting her on the spot. But clearly he didn't know the answer either, because if he had done any research at all, he would have known what concessions Donald Trump made. So this is a terrible argument. And that little exchange there is just more evidence, not that we needed any, but that he doesn't invite guests on his show with opposing views to have any semblance of a productive conversation. He has them on to take passive-aggressive pot shots and try to get them in gotcha questions and perpetuate whatever the mainstream narrative of the day is. But I've really been thinking a lot lately. I need to be more positive on this channel. So a positive that does come out of David's show is, like, if you missed your favorite CNN or MSNBC show the day before, David's channel is great because you could just tune into him, and the next day you'll get the exact same information and takes just from a different puppet that looks like
her didn't have a relationship.
Right.
And he said, sit down and work something out for the American people. And they did. That's leadership. You know, you don't pout and say, I don't like her, so I'm not going to work with her. I think that's what Biden did. Biden said, I don't have to work with you guys because we have 50-50 and Kamala will be the tie-breaking vote. So I don't have to work with you guys. So I'm not going to.
Right.
And
Trump, but I think isn't the difference, Amanda, that Trump would have done that if he had the luxury of having the House. He just didn't. That's not anything to, I mean, it was just a reality.
We can't work in hypotheticals, but I look at someone who was impeached in the House by Nancy Pelosi, and 3 months later, she sat down with his Treasury Secretary and hammered out a bill for the American people.
But the reason she had to sit down with Mnuchin was Trump, didn't want to play in the sandbox with her anymore because of the impeachment. It's sort of like a criticism of Trump, really.
He had his proxy work with her. The ultimate result was a COVID relief bill, wasn't it?
Yeah, just like with Biden, right? The ultimate result was a COVID relief bill.
A partisan COVID relief bill.
Is it partisan if 75% of Americans support it? That's tens of millions of Republicans. What's partisan?
COVID relief, of which 90% of this bill does not go to COVID relief.
We've debunked, I've debunked that extensively. I don't want to jump into that. So let's not jump into that. In the few minutes we have left, what is the policy right now that you think Republicans should be focusing on? What policy? Now, I know you're saying, well, they don't control anything right now. Okay, fine. But when Trump controlled everything, you still had Democrats proposing things and saying, this is what we would like to see. What are the main policy points you think would be advantageous to the Republican Party right now to be working on?
Well, the Republican Party can't work on anything right now. It would have been nice if the Democrats proposed an actual infrastructure bill because, as you know, infrastructure is a key word for bipartisanship.
Right.
But when you have a bill that's introduced that even Democrats can't agree on, where the majority of it is not for actual roads and bridges.
But this isn't my question.
Yeah, as far as what Republicans should be focused on, I think they should be focused on the most important issues to the voters that elected Donald Trump into office. I think it's actually a pretty long list, but I think a good start that most could agree on would be border security, stabilizing the economy, and reducing crime. And I think it's actually a pretty long list of things that Republicans should be focused on, but we'd all probably disagree somewhat as far as where we would rank them as far as order of importance to us individually. But in the best interest of the country, I think those three are a pretty good start. And I just want to address one more thing before I wrap up, something that David said. He said it's kind of a criticism of Trump that he doesn't want to sit in a room and negotiate with Nancy Pelosi. So he sent Mnuchin in to hammer out the details of the COVID relief bill. How is that possibly a criticism of Trump? This woman led the charge in impeaching him based on a bunch of made-up BS. Maybe the guy holds a grudge. David's trying to minimize what the Democrats have done and continue to do to Donald Trump. I can't imagine he's real excited to get in a room with a lot of them. But he delegated. That's what good leaders do. It's not like she cut in front of him in the lunch line and he said, I don't want to talk to her anymore. Ultimately, I think both sides of the aisle, unfortunately, engage in this digging your heels in, and if the other side's voting for it, I'm not, and I might think something is best for the people, and I want to vote yes on a bill, but my party says to vote no, so I'll do that. And the people that lose the most when they engage in that kind of behavior is the American people. What do you all think? Do you think there is one side that reaches across the aisle better than the other? I'd love to hear your opinion in the comments. Anyway, that's it for this video. If you like watching David Pakman interview guests, not listen to them, and then spout off a bunch of predictable talking points, then click on one of the two videos that just popped up on your screen. Otherwise, as always, I really, really appreciate you watching. The end.